Europe's most populous country, Germany, has reported a record number of COVID-19 infections. According to the country's National Disease Control Agency, 80,430 new cases have been registered across the country in a day. The surge has been recorded as the Omicron variant increases its spread in Germany. The previous daily record had been just over 65,000 in mid-November. 384 people infected with COVID died in the last 24 hours. A bill on making COVID-19 vaccination mandatory is expected to be voted on by Parliament in March. The vaccine mandate has sparked a debate across German political parties. A Bundestag debate on the subject is scheduled for 2 weeks' time. A law could be in place in March. Speaking in the Parliament, Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that Germany should make COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory for all adults.
Wir haben jetzt etwa 80.000 Infektionen zuletzt verzeichnet und deshalb müssen wir davon ausgehen, dass höhere Zahlen, wie wir sie anderswo sehen, auch hierzulande zu verzeichnen sein werden. Ein Grund, genau diesen Weg weiter zu beschreiten. Und ein Grund, das will ich an dieser Stelle auch sagen, warum ich mich dafür einsetze, unterstützt von vielen anderen, wie ich das gesehen habe im politischen Raum, aber auch unterstützt von den Regierungschefinnen und Regierungschefs der Länder, dass wir in Deutschland eine Impfpflicht einführen. Ich bin sehr dankbar, dass diese Debatte hier im Deutschen Bundestag nun, wo er wieder zusammentritt, auch beginnt. Und ich hoffe, dass es eine zügige, gute Beratung geben wird mit einem entsprechenden Ergebnis. Ich jedenfalls halte sie für notwendig und werde mich aktiv dafür einsetzen.
With the record number of new COVID cases, the country's lower house of parliament has tightened restrictions. Lawmakers from the far-right party Alternative for Germany heckled Scholz over his government's plans. The AfD protested against the introduction of the vaccination plus test rule for access to the plenary. Previously, proof of vaccination or a test was required. AfD accused the government of splitting German society, and the lawmakers held up signs reading "Freedom instead of division." The country is now facing a fourth wave of infections. Its rate of vaccination remains relatively low compared with some other parts of Europe, according to official figures. Some 72% of Germany's population is double vaccinated, and around 43.5% have received a booster shot of COVID. Well, for more on this, our correspondent Trent Murray is joining us live from Berlin. Trent, thank you for your time and welcome to this broadcast. Despite the surge in COVID cases, there is also the issue of protests against government's restrictions. What's the biggest challenge that Chancellor Olaf Scholz will have while trying to suppress the virus spread and also control the protests?
Yeah, well, that really is his number one challenge right now, isn't it? It's worth remembering that Chancellor Scholz has only been in the job for just over a month. He was only inaugurated at the beginning of December after Angela Merkel, and COVID-19 really has been his main focus in his first month. And it's been in many ways a difficult balancing act because he's been trying to do what he can from a federal government perspective to stem the flow of new cases, to try and slow down the spread of Omicron, but also knowing that there is growing pushback in parts of the country to the ongoing nature of many COVID-19 restrictions. And so those increase in protests are at times as well becoming increasingly violent. Police unions have warned in the past few weeks that many officers are growing very tired and their mental well-being is being challenged because every weekend pretty much they're having to go to these types of protests which can sort of turn violent, and there has been unrest as well at times. So that is the challenge, but nevertheless more restrictions are being introduced because of Omicron. From this Saturday, that vaccine passport plus rule that you mentioned will come into force here in Berlin. It effectively means that if you want to go out for dinner or go and have a cup of tea or coffee somewhere, that you'll need to show that you've either been boosted or double vaccinated and a test. So quite a burden on people, but the government says it wants to do that to try and slow slow the spread. Also, these FFP2 masks, the more dense ones, if you will, are now needed on trains and buses and subways. They're obviously more expensive. Some concerns that people won't be able to afford to buy them. Here in the city of Berlin, 1.4 million of them will be given out over the weekend for free.
Trent, there's already opposition in Parliament over vaccination rules. Will the debate called by the President likely yield any positive outcome or even restore public trust about the vaccines?
Yeah, well, that is another really good question in all of this, because Olaf Scholz does want to introduce a vaccine mandate. In other words, make it mandatory for people to get vaccinated against COVID-19, and that makes a lot of people uncomfortable here in Germany. It's often said that there are historical sensitivities because there is distrust of government, especially in the east of the country, which used to be under communist rule in the former East Germany, DDR, it's called here in Germany. And that is where vaccination rates are actually lower as well than the rest of the country. And so for that reason, the German government has really been trying to convince people to get their shots, to convince them that they are safe, that they are effective. But now what we're seeing is that period of convincing, if you will, is now possibly coming to an end. And now there will be, people will be compelled to get their jabs. And that is because of these new rules possibly around a vaccine mandate. Now, Parliament is divided somewhat on this. The polls show that about 60% of people do support a vaccine mandate, but obviously a sizable chunk at around 30% being opposed to it. And so what you're seeing now is politicians of all stripes sort of expressing their opinion about the introduction of these strict rules and whether it will do a good job at helping increase the vaccination rate to a higher level to where health officials would like it to be.
Live from Berlin, our correspondent Trent Murray speaking to us. Trent, thank you very much for your insights.